At the age of 23, Rebecca appeared to have the world at her fingertips. Attractive, intelligent, and charismatic, she was the envy of many peers and enjoyed a wide circle of friends and admirers. However, her journey had not been without its difficulties. Rebecca had grown up in poverty, raised by a mother who struggled to provide for the family after her father, an abusive alcoholic, abandoned them when she was just 4 years old. Despite the challenges of being a single parent, Rebecca's mother created a loving environment for her daughter. Rebecca excelled academically, maintaining good grades and forming lasting friendships throughout high school. After graduation, she navigated her way through college with the help of student loans, waitressing, and various odd jobs, ultimately earning an honors degree in English from Portland State University, in her hometown of Portland, Oregon. Aspiring to become a professor of English literature, Rebecca intended to pursue graduate studies. However, as her student loans became due and other financial obligations mounted, she found herself in need of a well-paying full-time job. This necessity led her to Baby Girls, an upscale gentlemen's club located just outside of Portland, which was a euphemism for a strip club that enjoyed considerable popularity in the area. Taking on a bartending position there, Rebecca's natural beauty made her a notable attraction for the club's patrons, even though she did not perform as a dancer. The lucrative income allowed her to manage her expenses while attending graduate school during the day, enabling her to continue her pursuit of higher education. On July 22, 2003, Ben Overton, a 45-year-old accountant, was discovered deceased just outside his residence in Portland. He was found alone in his vehicle parked in the driveway, exhibiting no signs of violence or struggle. It appeared that he had recently returned from an evening out but had not entered his home. Detectives Max Reynolds and Edwin Lee, who were present at the scene, noted that he seemed to be in a state akin to sleep. However, they observed an unusual detail. Overton's lips were blue, and there appeared to be a frosty substance in his mouth. A subsequent autopsy determined that Overton had succumbed to a significant heroin overdose, a condition that typically presents with such symptoms. Less than a month later, on August 24, a second victim was found. Matt Duff, a 29-year-old corporate attorney who was beginning to advance in his career at the esteemed firm of Cayenne Knight & Camper in Portland, was discovered dead in his condominium. He displayed similar symptoms, with blue lips and frost emanating from his mouth. His death was also attributed to a massive heroin overdose. Then, just under 2 weeks later, on September 3, a third victim was identified. Joe Ferguson, a 57-year-old affluent businessman, was found deceased in his office. Like the previous victims, his lips were blue, and his mouth was filled with frost. The cause of death was again determined to be a massive heroin overdose. Given the occurrence of 3 similar and peculiar deaths within such a brief period, detectives Max Reynolds and Edwin Lee began to investigate potential connections among the victims. All 3 were affluent professionals with no prior criminal records. All 3 individuals were in good health and showed no signs of drug use or suicidal tendencies. They were all men, yet there appeared to be no significant connection among them. There was no evidence to suggest that any of the 3 were acquainted, nor did they reside or work in proximity to one another. Overton, the first victim, was a divorced father of 2. Duff was single, and Ferguson, the most recent victim, was married with 3 children. As the investigation progressed, the situation became increasingly complex. On the morning of Saturday, September 27, another victim of a severe heroin overdose was found. James Anderson, a local real estate agent. Anderson, aged 38, was discovered in his vehicle in a parking lot adjacent to a local nightclub named Baby Girls. With this 4th death, detectives Reynolds and Lee began to suspect a potential pattern. They initiated an investigation into Anderson's final hours, uncovering that he had been last seen the night before at Baby Girls, where he spent the majority of the evening at the bar. The following morning, he was found deceased in his car, having succumbed to a significant heroin overdose. This prompted the detectives to explore the possibility of a connection between Anderson's death and the previous fatalities associated with baby girls. They conducted interviews with both the staff and regular patrons of the nightclub, presenting photographs of the other 3 victims to ascertain if anyone recognized them. Nearly all those interviewed identified the 3 as frequent visitors to baby girls, except for one. Rebecca claimed she had never encountered any of the victims at baby girls, despite most of the staff and patrons identifying all 4 individuals as regulars at the club. Detectives Reynolds and Lee began to uncover a troubling pattern, noting that the victims' shared patronage of baby girls was the only commonality among them. This led them to question whether their involvement with the club could have played a role in their deaths. With this revelation, the detectives intensified their scrutiny of the establishment, re-interviewing the staff, including Rebecca. Although Rebecca maintained her stance of not knowing any of the deceased, her demeanor began to raise suspicions. Previously amicable and cooperative, she exhibited unexpected irritability during the questioning. As the investigation progressed, the detectives gathered additional insights by speaking with Rebecca's colleagues, who provided further details about the 4 victims and their interactions with the staff. It was noted that the victims were known for their heavy drinking and for making advances toward the female employees. One of Rebecca's co-workers, Angel Fairchild, recalled overhearing a drunken Ben Overton engaging Rebecca in conversation, expressing a keen interest in her personal life and asking numerous questions. Another colleague, Desiree Franklin, remembered seeing Matt Duff conversing with Rebecca just a week prior to his death, noting that Rebecca appeared charming and friendly, which was consistent with her usual interactions with patrons. Other staff members also recalled observing Rebecca in an in-depth discussion with James Anderson at the bar the night before the incidents occurred. Rebecca was discovered deceased outside the club, and her interactions directly contradicted her statements. Initially, she was regarded merely as a witness rather than a suspect. However, this situation led the detectives to question whether she was concealing something. Consequently, detectives Reynolds and Lee shifted their focus towards Rebecca, re-interviewing her colleagues at Baby Girls. They uncovered that Rebecca harbored a darker aspect to her personality, marked by a growing resentment towards men, particularly those who objectified her at the club. Many of her co-workers recalled instances where Rebecca appeared overly friendly with certain patrons, yet they also remembered her making disparaging remarks about them. The detectives delved into Rebecca's background and learned of her challenging upbringing, which included an abusive alcoholic father and a mother who struggled to support the family. Despite these hardships, Rebecca persevered, graduating with honors from Portland State University, with aspirations of becoming an English professor. She projected an image of a diligent student and bartender, concealing a more sinister side beneath the surface. Additionally, the detectives interviewed some of Rebecca's college friends. One friend, Sarah Rose Hill, recalled Rebecca expressing her feelings of injustice regarding life and her disdain for men who mistreated women. Another friend, Emily Norris, remembered Rebecca discussing her disappointing romantic relationships and her desire for retribution against the men who had caused her pain. Furthermore, the detectives discovered that Rebecca had a fascination with the discussions surrounding true crime often revolved around notorious cases, and Rebecca exhibited a considerable understanding of forensic science. This knowledge raised suspicions among the detectives, who began to question whether she was utilizing it to obscure her own actions. As new evidence emerged, their concerns intensified, prompting them to act swiftly to prevent any potential harm she might inflict on others. They initiated close surveillance of her, monitoring her movements and eavesdropping on her conversations. This scrutiny led to the accumulation of further evidence connecting Rebecca to the fatalities. Investigators uncovered signs that she had been purchasing significant amounts of heroin, the same substance responsible for the deaths of the 4 victims. However, to establish a solid murder case against her, the detectives required more definitive proof directly associating her with the crimes. If you are intrigued by real-life murder mysteries similar to our content, we invite you to subscribe to our channel for additional true crime narratives. We welcome your thoughts on this case, or any other cases you would like us to explore. Please leave a comment. In the meantime, we urge you to stay safe. The detectives were inching closer to uncovering the truth, increasingly suspecting Rebecca's involvement in the deaths of Ben, Matt, Joe, and James. Their vigilance intensified as they gathered more evidence, theorizing that Rebecca had been leveraging her expertise in true crime and forensic science to conceal her actions. Her meticulous planning left minimal traces, yet the detectives remained resolute in their pursuit of justice to resolve the series of enigmatic deaths. The investigation was evolving. The situation escalated, and the detectives understood the urgency of their actions to prevent Rebecca from vanishing or inflicting further harm. As Detectives Reynolds and Lee compiled the gathered information, a clearer understanding began to emerge. They suspected that Rebecca had utilized her allure to gain the trust of her victims, subsequently administering drinks laced with heroin. The effects of heroin overdoses typically manifest slowly, taking approximately 1 to 3 hours, which could account for the death of one of the 4 victims near the club. The stage was set for a climactic resolution as the detectives prepared to confront Rebecca, determined to reveal the full scope of her criminal activities and ensure she faced justice. However, during their second interrogation, Rebecca sensed that the authorities were closing in on her. Her paranoia intensified, and she recognized that her arrest was imminent. As the detectives tightened their pursuit, they obtained a search warrant for her apartment on the afternoon of November 4, 2003. While Rebecca was believed to be attending class, the detectives entered her residence, where they uncovered a substantial hidden supply of heroin and syringes. Additionally, they discovered a notebook containing Rebecca's writings, which expressed her deep-seated anger and animosity towards men. One entry stated, "They think they can treat me like that. I'll show them. That's the last time that pig will ever grope a woman," while another declared, "They all deserve what they get. No one will suspect me." These writings revealed to the detectives the extent of Rebecca's dangerous mindset. Nevertheless, Rebecca was aware of the detectives' investigation and had taken precautions. She had installed a security camera in her apartment. Upon witnessing the detectives enter her residence, she realized it was merely a matter of time before they apprehended her. In a moment of desperation, fueled by a desire for revenge, Rebecca devised a plan to escape. That morning, prior to the club's opening, she visited baby girls armed with a gasoline canister. She doused the premises in gasoline and ignited it, causing the flames to rapidly engulf the entire building. The fire department responded promptly and succeeded in extinguishing the blaze. However, the club was left in ruins, reduced to mere charred cinder blocks. While the staff and patrons speculated about the perpetrator, the detectives were already aware of the truth. They discovered traces of gasoline, confirming the fire was deliberately set, and Rebecca's fingerprints on the gasoline can outside the club provided them with the conclusive evidence they required. Rebecca did not linger to witness the consequences of her actions. After igniting the fire, she swiftly made her way to Canada, seeking to establish a new life and evade capture. However, she understood the necessity of remaining mobile to stay ahead of law enforcement. Over the subsequent 13 months, she continuously relocated, ensuring she was always one step ahead of the authorities. Her journey took her from Canada to Cuba and then to Mexico, where she blended in with both tourists and locals. After spending a few weeks in Mexico, she moved on to Costa Rica, where she secured employment at a surf shop in a quaint beach town. To alter her appearance, she dyed her hair and donned glasses, hoping that the relaxed atmosphere and influx of tourists would aid in her concealment. Additionally, she took the initiative to learn Spanish, striving to integrate with the local community for a time. Rebecca adapted to her new life, constantly glancing over her shoulder while attempting to remain inconspicuous. Meanwhile, detectives Reynolds and Lee in the United States persisted in their pursuit of her case, resolute in their mission to locate her. They collaborated with international authorities to trace her movements. After more than a year of diligent searching, they uncovered that Rebecca had journeyed through Canada, Cuba, Mexico, and Costa Rica, indicating they were closing in on her. In early March 2005, a tourist named Jane Meyer, an American from Portland, recognized Rebecca while visiting a surf shop. Having seen news reports about the case, Jane recalled specific details and suspected that the woman working there was the fugitive. She promptly alerted local authorities, who in turn informed the U.S. detectives. The detectives were thrilled to receive a credible lead and promptly traveled to Costa Rica to verify Jane's information and coordinate with local law enforcement for Rebecca's apprehension. For several days, the detectives observed Rebecca, confirming her identity as she went to work at the surf shop and returned to her modest apartment. Everything aligned with their description of her, leading them to conclude that the time had come to act. On the morning of March 24, 2005, the detectives, accompanied by local police, surrounded Rebecca's apartment. They knocked on the door and called her name. Initially, Rebecca hesitated, gripped by fear and uncertainty, but she understood that escape was no longer an option. Gathering her courage, she opened the door to find the police waiting for her. The detectives apprehended her, and following the approval of her extradition from Costa Rica, she was returned to the United States to stand trial. During the proceedings, the prosecution, led by Ada Hillary Johnson, presented a comprehensive array of evidence. This included surveillance footage, heroin syringes, and a notebook containing Rebecca's agitated writings, all of which had been retrieved from her residence. Additionally, witnesses provided testimony regarding Rebecca's previous conduct and her fascination with true crime. In her defense, it was argued that she was not in a sound state of mind due to her traumatic upbringing, citing her father's abuse and her mother's difficulties as significant factors that had left her profoundly affected. However, the jury remained unconvinced, believing that Rebecca was fully aware of her actions when she committed the murders. On August 8, 2005, Rebecca Gaines was convicted of 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of arson, resulting in a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The victims' families experienced a measure of relief, knowing that justice had been served, yet they continued to endure the profound sorrow of their loss. Detectives Reynolds and Lee also felt a sense of achievement, having successfully halted a dangerous criminal and provided some measure of solace to the victims' families. The narrative of Rebecca Gaines emerged as a cautionary tale, illustrating how a once promising young woman could transform her pain and rage into horrific actions, ultimately becoming a serial killer. The story of Rebecca Gaines would resonate for years, serving as a stark reminder of how deeply buried anger and trauma can culminate in unimaginable deeds.